Alright, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, Teach here, bringing you a showcase video of the Stormcaller Raikou deck of the Pokemon TCG Online in the theme format. Now, lately I've really been enjoying the theme format of Pokemon TCG Online. I've always been a sucker for card games in general, played a lot of Magic, played a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh!, never really played Pokemon. But yeah, recently I've truly been enjoying myself playing the online version of the TCG. And specifically, it is the theme format. I think I'm not familiar with the game enough as right now to really play in the standard format. Apart from the fact that you actually need a deck, which is not as easy to get on the online game for Pokemon. But with that being said, I figured I wanted to make a video about my favorite deck in the theme format, which is the Raikou deck. It's called Stormcaller. It's a bit older than the standard decks you will face, which are top tier as of right now. So if this deck were in a tier list, I think it would be like tier 2 or maybe rogue status. But yeah, the deck itself. So your core Pokemon are the Mareep line, so Mareep, Fluffy, and Ampharos. Then there is the Zebstrika and Blitzel. You only run one of the Zebstrika, but you run two of the Fluffy and the Ampharos. Then there's also two Naganadel, which is the only Pokemon you really play later on in the game, which is not a electric typing, meaning, well, it's a fairly valuable Pokemon in that regard versus some matchups, but I'll talk a bit more about that later. And then obviously the mascot of the deck, Raikou himself, you also run two of him. And those are your most important Pokemon, I feel like. Obviously there is some extra form of utility with the Furfrou and the Smeargle, which both, I mean, they don't deal a lot of damage, but they both have utility on their attacks, so they might be good as openers, but you know, every deck has those, so it's not really that special. Now the deck itself. As of right now, you see some footage on the screen of me playing against the Charizard deck, which I think is the hardest matchup for this Stormcaller deck, apart from the decks that actually counter it, meaning the decks that actually play into the weaknesses of the Pokemon, being fighting. So the fighting decks as of right now are Towering Height and Surfetched, Galarian Surfetched I should say. But yeah, and the reason Charizard is such a good or bad matchup for Stormcaller is because the counter to Charizard is either playing very aggressive or hitting really hard. So you can either shut down Charizard's deck before they get to Nidoqueen or Charizard, or you can one-hit Charizard or Nidoqueen once they actually come into play. And this deck does not hit hard. Which is probably the biggest downside to the deck. But yeah, I figured I'd start off with this match. I've put, I think, 5 matches in total in this video. I figured I'd need a few matches to really show different matchups and different opening hands and various tips and tricks of the deck itself. But the way the deck works in general is you want to get to Ampharos as fast as possible, because Ampharos has the ability to put 2 lightning energies or electric energies in the lost zone to paralyze your opponent's active Pokemon, which has a 100% chance of success. Meaning that you put electric energies in the lost zone, which then gets Raikou's attack up to 120 damage. That is basically the basic mechanic in the deck. So Ampharos can paralyze an opponent's Pokemon, and Raikou is the only Pokemon that really hits hard. He hits for 120 damage, but in order for him to hit that hard, you need electric energies in the lost zone. Besides, you also have a fairly niche mechanic with Amphrose's attack itself. It's called Split Bomb, and it hits 2 of your opponent's Pokemon, which can both be on the bench, for 50 damage, which is, well, it's really good, honestly, because if your opponent switches out his or her active Pokemon when it's low, this usually means that Ampharos can finish it off later. If your opponent simply plays Pokemon which have very low HP, this means that Ampharos can sometimes even one-hit them. For example, in the Garchomp deck, the basic Pokemon Gible only has 50 HP. And in the Rillaboom deck, now I'm not too familiar with the Pokemon names, so pardon me for that, but they have one Pokemon who can play Blessing of Fluff. The basic evolution of that Pokemon is also 50 HP, so if you get to your Ampharos very early, you sometimes can just snatch some free prize cards just because you hit their bench fairly hard. So yeah, that's what Ampharos does. Raikou is fairly useless unless you really get your Ampharos' ability off. With that being said, if you do, Raikou will hit 120 for only 2 energies, which is very cheap for such damage. Then you've got Substriker. Now Substriker is the only one of the 4 core Pokemon who you only run 1 of in the deck. Despite this, you do run 3 Blitzel. So usually I use Blitzel as discard fodder for example the Ultra Ball. But that's not the point. The point is Substriker. What does he do? So Substriker also has an ability. It's called Sprint, with which you discard your hand in order to draw 4, which is absurdly useful. There's one specific niche use for why you want energies in your discard pile, which I'll get to in a second. But other than that, this really, it guarantees that if you're stuck with a hand, you can just refresh it anytime you want. You know, it's once per turn. So if you don't have a trainer card to draw more cards, or if you used your trainer card but you still don't have the cards you need to play against your opponent or to make a certain play you have in mind, then Substriker really comes in handy. Apart from that, he hits 60 for 2 energies, so if you happen to open up Blitzel and Substriker in your opening hand, you can really surprise your opponent, especially if you open up Professor Kukui as well. Because if you go first, and I typically do want to go first with the deck, if you go first, you can attach 1 energy to Blitzel, then your opponent does his or her turn, then you get to play again, putting your second energy onto Blitzel, and also evolving Blitzel in turn 2, meaning you put out 60 damage. And there are quite a few Pokemon who can't deal with that, especially if you play Professor Kukui. Alright, so the next game you'll see on the screen is a game versus the Hidden Depths deck, which runs the Kyogre, Golduck and Empoleon. This is obviously a fairly beneficial matchup for us because we are electric and Empoleon is weak to electric. Matter of fact, the whole Piplup line is weak to electric. Well, I believe that's it, however, because Kyogre and Golduck are both weak to grass. But with that being said, yeah, I'll still just be explaining the deck, talking over what I think is useful information to know, and I'll just leave the viewer to watch the matches. So yeah, so I discussed Substriker, Ampharos, Raikou. That leaves us with Naganadel. The reason I mentioned a minute ago that Substriker's ability to put energy cards in the discard pile by discarding them using Sprint is useful is because, as you can see on screen right now, Naganadel can use his ability once per turn to attach a basic energy from the discard pile onto him. The only other way I know of in the deck that can get your energies into your discard pile without retreating or discarding, retreating or having your Pokemon faint, is through the use of the Ultra Ball. So it's fairly nice to actually get to use Substrika's ability. Because it allows you to charge Naganadel very fast, especially because there's also the energy switch item card in the deck, which allows you to use Naganadel's ability. So then he attaches one energy. You can put one energy on him manually, since you can attach one energy each turn, and then you could potentially use energy switch to put another energy onto him from another Pokemon you have on your field, which would net him 3 energies in one turn, which can really take your opponent by surprise. Other than that, he, as I mentioned, is the only one who's not weak to fighting. Generally, even considering the utility Pokemon, he's the only Pokemon in the entire deck who's not weak to fighting. He hits alright, 3 energies for 80. But the reason it's nice is because, well, he can get those energies either passively by sitting on your bench and just attaching one energy each turn if you have a lot of energy in your discard pile, or he can do it still fairly rapidly, simply because he has energy acceleration in his own Pokemon card. Other than that, he's not too useful. He has a niche passive on his attack, which allows him to hit for double damage. So usually he hits 80, and with the double damage he hits for 160 if you have exactly 3 prize cards remaining. This is very niche. I have maybe generally used this where it really mattered, like 2 times in the 30 games I played with this deck. So yeah, well, I'm just gonna ignore that part. So yeah, that's the deck. The draw support is fairly, well, standard. I think most decks do have better draw support the newer they are, however. Especially now the Galarian Darmanitan and the Galarian Farfetch'd have a trainer card which allows them to switch and draw 3. And the let's see, what do we have? Yeah, so the Rillaboom deck, for example, has the Pokekit trainer card, which just simply allows you to take one Pokemon card from your deck to your hand, whichever one you want. I mean, that's something you would really like in this deck, but unfortunately, well, it's not what we got. We do, however, get double Rescue Stretcher. So if your opponent were to knock out Naganadel or Zebstrika or Ampharos, for example, you can easily return it. You also get an escape rope. So I have had a few situations where it's fairly clutch. And other than that, it's fairly standard trainer support. So you get How, you get Lily, you get Lady to search energy, and you get double Professor Kukui, which I think still is a fairly good supporter card, just because your opponent might not see the extra 20 damage coming. But yeah, it's sometimes situational, but in general the support cards, the item cards, are not bad, but they're not the greatest either as of right now. So with that being said, the strengths and weaknesses of the deck. The strength of the deck definitely is if you can get an early Ampharos going, you actually hit very hard with Raikou, and you actually can really stun your opponent if you have Ampharos and you have an excess of electric energies in your hand. Because for those who don't know, since Ampharos has 100% chance to paralyze your opponent's active Pokemon, as long as you pay 2 electric energies and put them into the Lost Zone, your opponent can't attack and your opponent can't hard retreat. So they can't retreat their Pokemon using the retreat cost of their active Pokemon. They can still play Escape Rope or Switch or Bird Catcher, I think the trainer card is called. But yeah, if they don't have that card, then the active Pokemon is stuck in the active slot, meaning Ampharos can attack 2 Pokemon on their bench with Split Bomb, dealing 50 damage each. Most Pokemon get 2-hit KO'd, and if they don't get 2-hit KO'd, they are typically downed or damaged enough to the point that Naganadel can finish them off with 60 or 80 damage. Yeah, that's typically how it goes. So for example, as we see on screen right now, we play versus the Charizard deck. Rapidash is KO'd in 2 Split Bombs. Any stage 1 Pokemon in the deck is KO'd in 2 Split Bombs. You can Split Bomb Charizard once, and then Charizard is down to 100 HP. He has the Roaring Resolve, dealing 20 to himself, meaning he has 80 HP left, so Naganadel again can take the KO there. So yeah, Ampharos can really mess up your opponent if they don't have a switch mechanic. So also a tip for the people playing against Stormcaller: just really don't overestimate the worth of your switch item card. You really need those, and don't just throw them away or use them for something that doesn't really net you anything, any benefits, or doesn't get you ahead in the game. Because, well, otherwise you can see what's going to happen right now. I paralyzed Nidoran. I Split Bomb his bench. He has 2 ways, generally he has 2 only ways to win this game, being Rapidash and Charmander. He doesn't have any way out of here, and I get to take the win. If I were very nasty, which I am, I could paralyze Nidoran again next turn, and well, that would still mean he's stunned essentially for another turn. As long as you have energy, you can stun your opponent. So yeah, that's the niche mechanic, or the unfair mechanic I should say, in this deck. But there's also a few things that you really can't deal with, and a good example of that is this match right here versus the Garchomp deck. If your opponent gets ahead early, you lose, because Substriker can't one-hit anything. So if you happen to get the Substriker, then well, good for you, but if they play Garchomp in turn 2, which they are about to do, you're not going to be able to deal with that card using Substriker. The same goes for Naganadel. Naganadel typically doesn't one-hit Pokemons with 80 damage, maybe 100 if you have Professor Kukui up. Meaning that in most cases, for example versus Charizard or versus Empoleon in the Kyogre deck, or in this case versus Garchomp, Naganadel is going to get one hit, and you don't get to one hit their Pokemon, meaning you lose fairly hard, especially since Naganadel requires 3 energies and he has to evolve. That brings us to our third core Pokemon. What about Raikou? So Raikou hits hard, but only if you already have played Ampharos and already have put energies in the Lost Zone. If you don't, Raikou is fairly useless. 2 energies for 30 damage is not too much. He is fairly beefy though, with 120 HP, so you might be able to stall some games with him. But in general, Raikou doesn't do much unless you already played Ampharos. Which brings us to our very last Pokemon, Ampharos. And well, Ampharos can deal with those situations. For example, with this Garchomp, Ampharos could deal with him. But he requires 2 things. First of all, Ampharos has to be on the field. And that's easier said than done. Because, well, you need to play Mareep, you need to evolve the Mareep into Fluffy, and you need to evolve the Fluffy into Ampharos. And there's only 2 ways in the entire deck to search Fluffy or Ampharos, which is 2 timer balls, which first of all they require you to be lucky since it's a coin flip. Second of all, well, you need to be lucky enough to actually get the timer ball, which is why what I mentioned earlier is such a big point, where Rillaboom for example plays Pokekid, which just instantly searches any Pokemon you want out of the deck. That would immensely boost the consistency of this deck, because just like in this game, I have Mareep, I have Ampharos, but I don't have Fluffy, meaning I have not a single way to actually deal with an early Garchomp. I've lost quite a few times against the Charizard deck as well, just because of this. They would draw Charmander, Charmeleon and have a Timer Ball, which would result into them having their Charizard before I have my Ampharos, and they just one-hit everything. And sometimes I did manage to play Ampharos, but I lacked the energy to actually paralyze their opponent, or the paralysis wouldn't really do anything. So for example, I would be able to paralyze their Garchomp. Say I did have Ampharos, I would be able to paralyze him, but it wouldn't do anything because I still need to knock the Pokemon out in 1 or 2 turns after that. And as I mentioned, the deck just doesn't hit hard, which includes Ampharos. Ampharos's only damage is the Split Bomb attack, which at the maximum deals 70 damage if you were to play Professor Kukui, which is very low. 50 damage as the highest damage on the opponent's active Pokemon for a stage 2 evolution, you know, it's not a lot, and that's why Ampharos really does need to use his Unseen Flash ability to paralyze the opponent. Otherwise you just, well, your opponent has too many turns to build up a stronger Pokemon to deal with Ampharos. And of course you don't get the chance to just Unseen Flash, Unseen Flash, Unseen Flash consecutively, because it requires just a tremendous amount of energies. With that being said, what happens if you do get Ampharos early? Well, that's what you'll see on screen right now. We are playing against the Empoleon deck, and here we actually do open up with Mareep, Fluffy and Ampharos. This really gets our deck going early. Now I don't have a way to attack, so I do risk shuffling Ampharos into the deck in order to actually get Fluffy online. But it works out. You'll see in a second. And the other weakness of the deck, as I already mentioned, is the matchups versus the fighting decks, being Galarian Surfetch'd and Towering Heights. In addition, Towering Heights has Mew, which has an ability that protects their bench from being damaged, meaning Ampharos can't attack their bench with Split Bomb. And on top of that, the deck is fairly aggressive, and Ampharos deck can't deal with that unless you actually get your Ampharos online very early, which typically you don't, because like I mentioned, you don't have a lot of reliable ways to search it. Alright, that's it for me. I'll just let the gameplay play out. As of right now, I have shown one loss versus the Garchomp deck as a showcase as of how you do lose versus aggressive decks or decks that get ahead early if you do not get ahead early yourself. I've shown the win versus the Charizard deck. As of right now, you're watching a win versus an Empoleon deck. And lastly, I'll be showcasing another win or two versus Kyogre in the Hidden Depths deck, and another Charizard matchup where you do get ahead early and you can really snowball your the fact that you're ahead early to really shut down your opponent. That's it for me. I'll be switching over to commentary over the actual game itself to well, talk about which steps and actions I took and why I took them. So maybe that will clear up some things for viewers who don't know this deck and are wondering about certain plays which they've already seen on screen so far. Alright, here I am again. Yeah, so let's do some commentary over the games I played. So in this specific game I'm playing versus the Imperial Command, which is an Empoleon deck. So my start was fairly slow. I did manage to grab one prize card, but my opponent already took two. As of right now, the Floatzel is the biggest problem, and as you can see, I only have basic Pokemon apart from Fluffy on my bench. Fluffy is already damaged to the point that I don't really want to risk playing him, because my ultimate answer to his Floatzel as of right now would be to play Ampharos. Ampharos can tank Floatzel for one turn, and Ampharos can potentially actually go for the paralysis through Unseen Flash. And luckily I have the only guaranteed way in the entire deck to actually pull my Ampharos out, which is by playing the Ultra Ball. Now first I play Professor Kukui just in case, because I might as well be that lucky to actually pull the Ampharos as a top deck, but I don't, so we go for the Ultra Ball anyway. There you go, Ampharos. Now I do only have one energy, which means that there's no way for me to actually play the ability, the Unseen Flash, to inflict the paralysis onto Floatzel, but in this case it doesn't matter, because obviously Floatzel gets two shot by Ampharos. Now the reason I chose to inflict damage on the Abomasnow is because Abomasnow has 130 HP. Dealing 50 damage to it means that he's got 80 HP left, which is exactly the amount of damage that my Naganadel deals. And there you go, there is Naganadel. Typically, this is the way I like to approach my opponent's bench, because, well, once Ampharos is out, the biggest damage I have in the entire deck is from either Naganadel or Zebstrika, with 80 damage from Naganadel or 60 from Zebstrika. And well, if I don't get the opportunity to deal that damage to their Pokemon, in this case their Abomasnow, and their Abomasnow would be able to attack my Pokemon, then I have no answer for their plays, meaning they get to snatch multiple prize cards or disrupt my board, my bench or my active Pokemon as much as they like, until I actually have enough damage on either Naganadel or Zebstrika to actually take out their Pokemon. And if their active Pokemon, in this case the Abomasnow, would be the active Pokemon for them, if they did have the energy, if it is already damaged to the point that Naganadel can one-shot it or finish off the knockout, then I don't have to worry about anything. I can simply play Naganadel and take out their Pokemon without having to sacrifice my bench Pokemon to stall out the game to the point that I, well, can take out their Pokemon. And as you can see, Naganadel charges himself up with his ability, the charging up ability. Well, not too much to talk about really after that. I did lose Ampharos, but I figured it's worth it because they have no answer to my Naganadel, since it's one hits anything they have except for Sandslash, but Sandslash is their way to, of their form of draw power right now. Now, unfortunately, I do get sleep stalled by Manaphy. He has the Water Pulse attack, which puts my Naganadel to sleep. Obviously it's a 50% chance for me to get through sleep and one hit the Manaphy, which unfortunately doesn't happen, so twice in a row he is the one who's lucky. Now I do get my Timer Ball here. I can play it, I do. The thing is, I have a Fluffy and an Ampharos still in my deck, but if I were to play Fluffy here and I don't do anything else, I am still in desperate need of drawing Ampharos, and that's why I don't go for Fluffy and I pull out the Zebstrika, because Zebstrika gets draw power through the sprint ability, allowing me to discard my hand basically to search or to draw 4 new cards. And I have had a few games where I actually drew myself out by utilizing sprint too often. So I tend to always still check if I have enough cards in my deck. That's why you typically see me check my pile very often. And what I wanted to happen, which is play Substriker, use sprint and then draw Fluffy or Ampharos, actually did happen, so I'm fairly lucky, I should say here. But yeah, other than that, this gets me my Substriker and my Fluffy. If I did manage to get both head coin flips on the timer ball, I would have simply picked Fluffy and Ampharos, because that would basically get me to the same point as I am at now. And now the game is getting fairly close, too close for my comfort at least, because he's got only one prize card left. Now, using Professor Kukui, I can actually one-hit the Empoleon with Substriker, only because Empoleon is weak to lightning or electric. I was debating using the Rescue Stretcher here, but I figured, well, I've got Ampharos, I've got Substriker, and I've got Naganadel in my hand, so there's nothing I really can use Rescue Stretcher on right now, so I might as well keep it. And now you get back to where I just mentioned that, well, you're in a very good spot when your opponent does not have an answer to your active Pokemon. And if I had not played Substriker, I would not have had an answer to his Empoleon, because I would have had to play Ampharos, because I would have pulled Ampharos from the deck with the timer ball, and Ampharos deals 50 damage, not 60, which would mean that I would be a bit short on one hitting the Empoleon, which would have actually cost me the game. So I'm very glad that I made the right call by picking Substriker with the timer ball. Okay, so here you see me utilize the Unseen Flash ability, putting 2 energy cards in my lost pile, in the lost zone. You see also an arrow pointing upwards next to Raikou. This means that you have lost energy, lost zone energy, so therefore his attack is powered up. I went for the Buizel and the Abomasnow because I need to get 2 prize cards, and I had to guarantee that I would get those 2 prize cards next turn. Now I could have used Manaphy, or well, I could have damaged Manaphy with my Split Bomb. Didn't. That part of the deal didn't really matter. I am still fairly lucky here. If I had still been asleep, I wouldn't have been able to hard retreat. Luckily I did still draw the escape rope, so I would have been fine either way. You know, that's just the top deck, the power of the top deck. But yeah, this allowed me to then finish off the game with the Ampharos. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I hope you enjoyed, I hope you learned something, I hope I was able to actually get you curious about the TCG Online, or at least, you know, maybe get you back into it, or at least wanting to try out this Raikou deck. Or some other deck you maybe saw in this video, for example the Garchomp deck. It looked fairly strong, if I do have to say so myself. But that was me. If you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments. If you have any suggestions, you might as well leave them too. I don't know if I'm going to upload any more of these types of videos, but I might as well, so you never know. Have a great day. The Teach is out.